Good evening, Wakefield. I'm going to call to order at approximately 7:03 p.m. the July 15th, 2024 meeting of the Wakefield Town Council. I would ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item 3, attendance. All of our councilors are present, and Vice Chair Dombrowski is present as well on Zoom. Sherry, do we have any public engagement? Item number 4.
Oh, Mr. Chair, we do not have anything tonight.
Okay then. Item 5, presentations and updates. The first item, item 5A, is the open space and recreation plan. Please step up, folks, identify yourselves, and feel free to have at it.
Hello, I'm Judy Green. I'm the chairman of the Open Space and Recreation Plan Update Committee.
I'm Jim Luciani, chairman of the Wakefield Conservation Commission.
Welcome.
Thanks for having us. I do have a PowerPoint. Oh, there it is. I'm working in glasses. The launching point for the open space update was COVID lockdown. There was a lot of interest, renewed interest in open spaces, in the trails. People used the open spaces for gathering spots because the recreational aspects weren't open in the parks. And it just, I think, heightened the awareness of the resources that we do have. The plan update was pitched to the town administrator, a budget was set, and from the start, Steve was on board 100%. He's been so supportive throughout. So I just want to recognize that this wouldn't have gotten off the ground without his support. So the Conservation Commission reviewed open space plans from surrounding towns and looked at different consultants, and they settled on the Horsley-Witten Group and MAPC, and ultimately chose the Horsley-Witten Group mainly because they had a more plan that seemed to be customized to each town. A committee was established from representation from the permitting boards. Town council is mentioned, but Julie Galvin attended a lot of the meetings. She wasn't there as a town councilor. Erin Kokinda, the Economic Development Director, Bill Renault, Karen Burke from the Senior Center, Dan McGrath, and also a member of the public. The history, the first open space plan was established by the Conservation Commission in 1987. It was updated in 2000, 2005, and then in response to a grant that the town planner was pursuing, the 5-year action plan was updated in 2012. So it hasn't had a full update since the 2005 plan, so it's a little bit overdue. The open space plan gives a comprehensive, detailed view of our open space resources, our recreation resources. It builds on other initiatives and plans that the town has that are focused on open space and recreation. And it's ideally a tool that's used not just by the permitting boards, but also by the public at large to give us a direction on what everyone would like to see in terms of open space and recreation, how we can get there. And I think the most important aspect is it makes us eligible for state and federal open space and recreational grants. And I know Bill Renault, who loves pursuing grants, is already looking at different park grants under this. So I think that's a great start. The community engagement, we had 4 committee meetings that were open to the public, 2 public forums, and a community survey that ran from March till September of 2023. And we tried to space it between the master plan surveys and the meetings so as not to overlap and kind of burn people out on surveys and meetings. And I think we did a pretty good job with that. And the majority of feedback that's listed, page. It was reflective of what's been talked about in other plans and in other forums, maintaining our open space, acquiring new parcels, connections between spaces, and I think that's being identified with our bike ped plan, and the rail trail is certainly connecting areas. Social cohesion, it was felt that the open spaces, and especially the recreational areas, are meeting places, and anyone who sat at a youth game, you get to know the people when you're at the games all the time, and you meet new people, and it really does give you a community connection. And I think that's a really important part of our open spaces and promoting the open spaces. Resilience and climate action goals, that's another component that was talked about, and promoting environmental equity and justice. There was a particular mention about microtransit. That was mentioned as part of, I think, the master plan, and possibly using an on-demand microtransit to bring people from environmental justice areas to some of the open spaces, the trails, and the recreational areas, to try to get them connected as well. It pulled, the plan itself pulled from different initiatives, sought feedback from town departments, boards, committees. I think the most interesting feedback was from the Youth Council. They had a in-person forum, and they touched on, it was funny when I look back at the plans, because a lot of the ideas they touched on were ideas that were in the original 1987 plan. So it's kind of like a back to basics. A lot of the kids ride bikes. Are there safe routes to the bikes? More activity, diverse activities at recreation areas, so it's not only sports-based. The community garden was mentioned. So I thought their feedback was kind of reflective of what the broader feeling was, and I was glad to see it in this group of junior high and high school kids. It was really great. 4 goals and objectives were chosen: an awareness and stewardship of open spaces, parks and recreation facilities. There was a lot of discussion about better signage for the trails, using the wayfinding capabilities that the town has to direct people to certain, whether it's a recreation area or a trail. Improve accessibility, inclusiveness, and equity of recreation and open spaces for residents of all ages and abilities. And Karen Burke really came in with a lot of great ideas in terms of the age-friendly plan. There was some talk about having sensory aspects to some of the playgrounds. And in the recommendations part of it, of the ADA portion, it mentions universal design for the playgrounds. And a good example of that is the wheelchair adaptive swing that's at the Dolbear School. And there are a lot of innovative playground equipment that is handicapped accessible and especially wheelchair adaptive. So it's something that we can look at down the road to increase participation, the range of participation in these areas. Coordination amongst departments, committees, as well as regionally in terms of open space, recreation, and sustainability. That's been talked about as well since 1987, getting the boards together. And I think the importance, from my point of view, is every board, every permitting board and commission has a different set of regulations and rules that they're bound by, and they don't always align with the next one. But I think a lot of times, if there were more coordination, or if there was a better awareness of what the regulations are that they're bound by, it would help streamline the permitting process. And I would hope it would also heighten the awareness for the public, and maybe get some more people stepping up to volunteer on these boards and committees once they have an idea of how they actually operate, because I think that's important as we move forward. And protection of the natural resources, open spaces, and recreation facilities. That discussion also focused on the tax title parcel review that's currently underway. The town forest, it was talked about for protection in the 1987 plan as well, and that's my number one goal in this plan, is to get the town forest protected. And I think that it can go a long way in setting the tone for how the town wants to move forward and their commitment to how these resources can be used in terms of sustainability and climate awareness. So I think that project will be helpful in this realm. And these are the recurring themes. I was surprised in the 1987 plan that they also discussed trails. There was a lot, they had a trail committee at that time, and there was a lot more interest in the trails. But there is definitely a renewed interest, because there is, behind Maple Way, there's a trail system, and then you cross Oak Street, and it connects to Holland Road, and it brings you right out to J.J. Round. And it's one of the highest points in Wakefield. So it's really a beautiful spot. It's a great kid-friendly area. I know some people that snowshoe in the winter there. A couple of my friends who have little guys, they'll take bike rides and bike through there. So I think it's having something right in your own backyard, I think, is a huge asset. And the town forest is also part of an area of critical environmental concern. And I think that's something that could be highlighted, because it is a unique designation in this state. There aren't really any around this area. So I think that's something. The evaluation of tax title properties, that was actually mentioned in 1987. So that's been an ongoing challenge. Expand recreational opportunities. It's to encompass all abilities and ages. And I think the age-friendly plan and some of the initiatives in that will be rolled in. A second community garden was discussed. I think other good examples are the Moulton Playground, where there's the fit court, the proposed roller rink, the pickleball court at Wakefield. So I think a lot of initiatives have already started that kind of roll in with this. Communication amongst the boards, and participation in local planning efforts in regards to open space and water management. And I think that's something I'd like to see reinvigorated. There was a partnership with the Saugus River Water Council, especially with the Saugus River and its management. And there's also opportunity with these grants to collaborate with other towns. Melrose, Stoneham, and Reading have collaborated to come up with a sustainable landscaping plan that was funded through an MAPC grant. So I think things like that are things that could be pursued down the road. Broader grant opportunities. So the next steps, we have received a letter of conditional approval from the Division of Conservation Services based on the first draft. The Conservation Commission and Planning Board have issued letters of support. MAPC, theirs hasn't been received yet, and we're here tonight to request a letter of support from the Town Council. And we're happy to answer any questions.
Questions from councilors?
Yeah.
Councilor Carney.
Thank you for the presentation. It was excellent. I was just interested in the environmental justice community down into Colonial Point.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get more information regards to that? Because I go down there, I've never seen any kids down there. Is it Section 8 people living in the apartments, and that's what makes
Yeah,
it?
it's based on a percentage of minority and non-English speaking. So it is probably right around the Colonial Point area. And they have a tennis court in the back. I don't know if it's an active tennis court, but there is also a trail right down the street, the Reedy Meadow Trail. So that's one area but that's why I think the microtransit may be something that would be worthwhile. Then the kids who live there can be part of the activities at the parks and part of the phenomenal rec programs that we have in town.
I just took a ride by there, and there's no recreation for young folks except for that trail.
Right, right.
But also, knowing the area, it's a great walking area or running area.
It is.
Going up through the shop mall, behind the shop mall, you can go to 2 different golf courses there.
Right,
So,
right.
when they talked about, it was mentioned in here that there's no recreational areas close to that. And
Yeah, I think they meant more playgrounds, that type of, yeah. Because Edgewater has the beautiful little trails as well.
I think that's what over the years, I've seen the interest in this fact that things have changed now. And, I go back to the days where we had playground instructors, we'd all get out to the local playground. And now,
Right.
Parents wouldn't let the kids out of their sight.
Right.
So, that brings up the automobiles and delivering the kids to the locations where they can. And, I'm totally in favor of the work you're doing here, but I think it's a lot different than how it used to be. And,
Yeah, I
our
agree.
playgrounds are underutilized.
Yeah.
And they're great green spaces, and if we somehow can use them more, it would be beneficial.
Yeah. I think Dan McGrath does an outstanding job, especially with his summer program. He has a drop-in program at the parks, and I know that's a huge opportunity for a lot of parents.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
I think Ed has his hand up, but I
Oh,
can't
I'm
see it.
sorry.
It's like
Counselor
blurry.
Dombrowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this presentation, Ms. Green. Question for you, and I guess this is better maybe directed at Mr. Mayo or our clerk. I heard a lot of this committee. I don't recall us ever appointing a committee. Did we do that as a town council? And am I just misremembering? Because I don't believe we ever did.
The Conservation Commission actually appointed the committee.
Yeah, we did, town council did not, Ed.
Concom appointed
Okay.
it. Yep.
Has that happened before? Because I've never seen that happen before.
I think this is the first time we've done it, actually.
Okay. Yeah, I just feel like from a pure just process standpoint, it just seems a bit odd because I don't know, it seems unusual. And then the other piece I was trying to understand is this idea of environmental equity and justice. Can you maybe just expound upon that a little bit more? Like, because promoting environmental equity and justice was identified as one of the goals, from your presentation and from the report itself.
Well, it was based on providing recreational opportunities and open spaces as much as possible in every area of town, whether it's pocket parks or more recreation opportunities.
And are there particular areas of town where this is found to not be the case?
Well, I think,
Where there aren't those opportunities? Because I mean, obviously we have our neighborhoods are just, we just have a dynamic town. So there are different areas of town obviously have different types of housing. I'm thinking about Foundry obviously has more, high rises and less green space, for instance. But I'm just confused by, I feel like it's such a buzzword now to say, environmental equity and justice. And what does that mean in terms of practical terms for a Boston suburb like Wakefield?
well, I think just, as I said, a variety of recreational opportunities. For the example that was used at Audubon Road, trying to enhance something there, or access to recreational areas.
And then I was also curious about the way that the report had been written, because I noticed that within the report, our body was identified as the select board, and Mr. Mayo was identified as town manager, which obviously those are not labels that are applicable to our particular community. So is this more of a cookie cutter type report, or a body of recommendations, or how did that come to be? Because it doesn't feel like it was something that was organically drafted, within our own community, obviously, because we wouldn't use that kind of terminology.
No, that was barely an editing error. I don't think this was a cookie. I mean, not that I'm aware of. I think it was just a straight editing error.
Okay, but I guess what I'm getting at is it had to have presumably been sourced to something, right? Because nobody called us the select board, nobody called Mr. Mayo town manager. So it feels like that was taken from something else, right? That's why I'm saying, was there
Yeah.
some sort of template that was used and modified, or do we know? Does anyone know?
I don't know if they've used a template. I can find out.
Okay, all right, that's what I had, thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor Chines.
Thank you. A couple of things. One, I just wanted to maybe clarify for the public, the environmental justice designation is actually a state designation based on certain criteria. So, just in case there's sort of public confusion as to sort of why that area was designated as such, I mean, it's based on, very set criteria around median income, around, minority composition of the population and so forth. So, as we think about that, that is a state goal as well, to make sure that there's equitable access to recreational resources for those areas. I wanted to just really reflect on this and say thank you for the work that's been put in here. I had the opportunity to sit in on a couple of the meetings, at least one of the public forums, and took the survey, and was really impressed with the caliber of the discussion and the work that went in. And Judy, for you, serving as chair and leading this effort, I really appreciate the efforts that you put into to get folks involved. I think there's a lot here that's really exciting. First of all, it's exciting just to have the inventory of public spaces. And this was one of the things I laughed when I took the survey, because it's asking me about all these spaces. And, there were a certain number of them that I had to think about. I don't actually know where that is.
Yeah.
And I suspect I'm not the only one. And so I think the fact that this is, first and foremost, in many ways, sort of a roadmap of what we have in the community and what we
Right.
have to build on, that's something that's really exciting. And I'll sort of put in an ask to Mr. Mayo. I had reached out to Jen McDonald about this probably a month or so ago, but it would be great if we could think about a way of getting information out there, around sort of the recreational spaces that we have. Maybe like a park finder on the website or something that, helps people, especially new residents that maybe don't have the experience here, to connect with the resources that we have. The other thing that I'm really excited about is the action plan that's identified. When I looked at it, one of the things that impressed me was it's all things that feel very achievable.
Yes.
And, when you do these planning documents, sometimes you aim high, and that's appropriate, right?
Right.
We
Right.
want to be aspirational at times, but I think there's a very clear roadmap in this document about what we can do in short order with not a lot of resources to really make a significant impact on the
Agree.
protection of the spaces that we have and the promotion of them to folks in the community. So I just wanted to say really a great job on this. I'm comfortable with the town council issuing a letter of support, and I'm very excited to see this work come to completion. So thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor Vincent.
Thank you, Chair McLean. Thank you for the presentation. Judy, the questions and issues I'm going to go over with you, I went over with you earlier today in Mr. Mayo's office. And you informed me that you're going to make the changes to the plan on this.
Yes.
So I'm just going to highlight for the council a couple of my concerns. The first one's a legal concern. In the document on page 47, it says that the Wakefield School Department owns 110 acres of land, and then Appendix C, which is the inventory of the open spaces and recreation resources, lists the school department as the owner and manager of all Wakefield public schools. Chapter 8-4B of the town charter states that all real property and buildings under the school committee or school department shall be transferred to the town council, and the maintenance of such property and buildings shall be transferred to the Department of Public Works on or before July 1, 2000. That's part of the concern I have with Horsley Witten, who put the draft plan together, because in my opinion, this reminds me of MAPC with some of the stuff they've done. I expect a certain level of professionalism from them, and I would expect them to look at our town charter to make sure that they comport with the will of the residents of Wakefield, which is that the legal responsibility for school department, real property and buildings, is the town council and the Department of Public Works. So those appendices that lists all the schools and says that the school department manages and controls them needs to be changed, as well as page 47 that says that the Wakefield School Department owns 110 acres of land. A couple of the other highlights that I have that we went over earlier today. On page 7, the plan says that Wakefield occupies 7.9 square miles, but on page 12, it says that Wakefield covers 7.39 square miles. Now, that could just be a typographical error, or Horsley Witten could have drawn a legal distinction between occupies 7.9 square miles and covers 7.39 square miles. I'd like you to clarify that with him for me. The next one is on page 26. It talks about the MBTA 40A. The second to last sentence of the second paragraph references, quote, Wakefield's current proposed district is located around Wakefield Station, close to downtown, end quote. That was true on March 21st, 2024, when the draft was promulgated. But it seems to me that Horsley Witten did not update this since then, because at town meeting in May, that proposal was not adopted. So that language on page 26 needs to come out. There's a lot of other grammatical and substantive, and I went over them with you today, and I'll sit down with you and go over them to make sure that they're made, but I'm not ready to endorse this plan until those kind of changes are made. And I do hope that maybe somebody from Horsley Witten can come and talk to us in the future and explain to us that they've made the appropriate changes that need to be made. Like I said, there's about 4 or 5 other ones that I won't waste the town council's time with, but those were the main ones. But once I found the legal problem with the school department, I really gave this a pretty good scrub over the weekend, but I don't have time to proofread a 300 and some page document. I did go through the first 73 pages and briefly went through the appendices. But when I found these things and during that short period of time, that doesn't give me a comfort level in wanting to support this right now until at least those changes are made in the plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other counselors? Counselor Butt?
So, Judy, I thought this was great, and I loved your presentation. I echo what Councilor Chine said, Steve. It'd be great to, have the open areas on our website, but also if there's ever an executive summary or something from here that people, especially people who participate in the survey, can read. So is there a timeline, hearing Councilor Vincent's concerns, but is there a timeline or just to get this in?
There's not a specific timeline. Since we have the conditional approval, it's really pending just the letters of support.
I mean, I wasn't in the conversation with you and Councilor Vincent earlier. They don't sound like they're major changes.
No, those were the main ones I found during the first read. There's a few more that aren't major that I think they need to change. But I did not give this a read like I did with the bike and ped plan at all, because it's way too long. But these changes, which are at minimum, need to be made. And I think Mr. Mayo concurs with that. You met with me today that these changes need to be made. And I did run the school committee one by Mr. Mullen, because I'm not going to come in here and talk about legal stuff without clearing it through Mr. Mullen. And he concurred with my assessment that we need to change the language concerning the school department property falling under the jurisdiction of the town council. So as long as those changes are made and I have a chance to review that, then I'll be placated.
Thank you.
Counselor Butt, anything further?
So I guess, Chair, I just ask, I guess what the process is going forward then.
Well, I have a couple questions and comments, and then we'll move to that.
No, you can go ahead. I had a question.
Counselor Butler has his hand up.
No, and this isn't for you. This is probably more for the council as a whole. They're respectfully requesting a letter of support. If we don't give them a letter of support, does that impact this moving forward in any way, shape, or form? Or is this just a nice to have, or do you want us to rubber stamp it?
It's a required element.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to know if, a requesting of a letter of support, whether we do it or not, does that matter? And apparently it does.
Right. Would it, just in general, would it hold you up significantly if, what I ordinarily have been trying to do as chair of the council is let people know when a vote is expected every time I can, and then come back at the next meeting and do the vote. So I'm wondering, would one meeting deferred to
No.
August 12th make a big difference?
I want the council to be comfortable with it.
Um,
That's perfectly fine.
In terms of just overall things that I noticed from this report that I thought were very interesting, I've stated it myself, so I noted that you stated that, or the Horsley Group or whoever stated it, stated that we are a mature suburban community. We're approaching build-out. We are dense. We are denser than most of our neighbors.
Yes.
We're actually denser than the average American city. So
Right.
if I were them, I probably would have, because I clicked on the link and I too went over the first 80 pages, I would have said something about, yeah, but you got to look at Manhattan, right? I mean, 1600 is probably like, Des Moines or
Right.
someplace. I was impressed that we have as many public spaces as we have. I noted that one of the objectives could be to purchase land, although I don't know that we have, any land in our sites and/or the money to purchase it with. I am curious, and might actually be a question for the town administrator, as well as to where we are on all these title searches. My understanding is we appropriated some ARPA funds and,
Most of the tax title searches have been done.
okay, and is there a difference between the tax title searches we're doing
Well-
and whatever the Conservation Commission would need to
Some
assume
of-
some of these properties?
Some tax title may be conservation land, probably a lot of them are, some may not. Sometimes this board gets them, it's a little lot in the neighborhood, someone wants to buy and either add to their house or put a house
Okay,
on.
so the ones that
right.
are pending here, we don't currently have a funding source that's working on the titles that the report indicates are not yet
On pending
completed.
on the title searches, or pending on the purchasing, or potential purchasing.
Well, I thought in the report, some of them were done and some of them weren't.
I don't think we're
read
waiting
that?
for any more title searches.
No,
No,
no, you had,
yeah.
no, there was one list.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if a lot of the properties you mentioned could potentially be conveyed to the Conservation Commission
Yeah, I
at some
think
point in the near
that
future.
request would be made. Yeah, not every parcel, no.
What is a Miyawaki forest?
I'm
I just
glad
want you to know I
I'm
read
glad that
these
one didn't go to
materials.
It's a microforest that contains, it can be in a 100 square foot area, and it contains a variety of different species. And it's an incredible resource that is a carbon sink. It has a huge ecological value. They have one at Dennehy Park in Cambridge, and they're also putting one at Somerville High School. And it's something that every time I go by the rail trail across from the junior high school, I mean, it could be a little spot like that tucked in, or a little spot at Mapleway Park. I think it would just be a unique, it's a little microcosm of here's a small area and how much ecological benefit we could attain from it. So
Okay.
I think it's a great example.
Something like a floating wetland or,
Correct.
yeah,
Correct.
okay.
It
Um,
has aesthetic appeal, and it heightens your awareness of.
Do you know how often the environmental justice areas are reviewed? Is that kind of done with the census, like 2020, 2030?
Yeah, it's done with the census.
Yeah, because I know we also have some new buildings that are probably a little bit different than 95, like on 14 Audubon,
Yeah.
where there's a pool and there are, some.
Yeah, when this started, the
greater
environmental
amenities.
justice, the designated area was Foundry Street, that area. And then with the change, it was moved to Audubon.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether Audubon will ultimately change based on the demographics
It
change
could,
over there.
it could.
Okay. Just a couple other typographical type of things. I think public safety building is done. I noticed, as did Councilor Vincent, the 40A, there are places where the environmental sustainability, I believe, committee is referred to as the commission, so it should be consistent and correct. The town planner should be named as to what she is. I believe it's senior planner, whatever the title actually is,
Okay.
along with, the select board, which is no longer. Relative to other items, there are some items in there like TMD where I don't know that we've really adopted it yet. I think it was brought by Ms. Kokinda to the ZBA. I'm not sure they really understood what they were hearing. I'm not sure I would have either, because it's just kind of general talk about environmental justice and so forth. I do see this as mapping out in MAPC kind of format, and no offense to you guys, we have had some situations, including the lawn struggling master plan, where I don't believe we've gotten potentially what I hoped we would get from consultants. So I would agree with Councilor Vincent. This is listed as a draft. I don't think one meeting is going to make a huge
No.
difference. I would like to get a copy that, I'm not going to read the 300 pages, but at least read those first 80 and see some of these changes made. Me personally. If the council wants to vote a letter, over my objection, I'm fine with that too. Counselor?
I just had a question in terms of thinking about, that we have the master plan. But the way we should really think about this is sort of your section 8 and section 9, which is your overall goals and objectives you want to achieve, and then you've broken those out into 4 goals. And then section 9, where you have the plan, so the 7-year plan. And then I noticed really there was a tremendous amount of in-depth work done I think it's in the appendices, on the different disability and accessibility issues to address. And you addressed a few of them, or you have a few that are slated, but it seemed like the majority of them were pushed off until 2031, or past 2031. I wasn't sure how that determination was made, and was it with town council, was it with the groups, or was it, I'm just not sure.
I think it's
how.
more funding based. I know
Yeah.
the discussion about that was centered with Bill Renault
Okay.
as the ADA officer.
Okay. Thank you. By the way, I love that. I do feel like the goals and objectives in the action plan, maybe don't bury the lead and have it on page 70 and 72 or 73. Just like.
It's a set format that the state has.
Oh,
But,
that's
yeah,
thus the rationale.
Yeah.
Okay. And
I agree.
again, it took you're like, what are we doing here?
Right. Right.
So
I
that
agree.
for the townsfolk who may be listening, for both of them, probably dig into like page 70 or so.
Well, procedurally, I prefer to put it over to the next meeting, but if anyone wants to, make a motion
Do you need
to
a motion?
do it today, or a motion to
I move we lay it on
table
the
it until
table to our
next
next
meeting.
regular scheduled meeting.
There's a motion seconded. All those in favor, we are going to do this by roll call.
Discussion first.
Discussion first. I think, hopefully we're discussed out, but we'll see. Any further discussion?
Sure. The only thing that I would say is this seems like something we'd rather have us be somewhat unanimous on, or somewhat. So I would rather, I'm in favor of postponing it.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will start with our remote vice chair,
Aye.
Counselor Butler,
Aye?
Counselor Vincent,
Yes.
Counselor Butt,
Yes.
Counselor Chines.
Yes.
Counselor Carney,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Sherry, that is 7-0. Thank you so much for
Thank
your
you.
work and
Thank
your
you for your
presentation.
comments.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you so
Have a
much.
good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, item 5B is Housing Production Plan Advisory Committee. We put vote expected because Steve has, wanted to put together a list and get this out there so that we can get the HPP and the RFP approved and moving forward. Is there a listing of, in the Govenda, Steve, of the potential,
Yes, what the recommendation was from Samantha, was member from the Planning Board, Wakefield Housing Authority, Town Council, Council on Aging, Affordable Housing Trust, the Disability Commission, Wakefield Housing Authority tenant. However, we are, and two members of the public at large, and what we thought was important is that there is a request that we have, not just homeowners, but tenants, because I think that people that are renting, because their experience may be very different in trying to find housing, having just helped my last one buy a house. It is a little bit different today than it was a few years ago. I think we heard from people at town meeting during discussion on chapter 48, section 3, regarding, it's a little bit different for tenants today than it was. So I think perhaps some councilors mentioned to me that they didn't want specifically housing authority tenant, which makes sense to me. So maybe there are 3 members of the public at large, encouraging, at least 1 or 2 tenants in there. Only suggestion.
Yeah, I think just Chair's prerogative for a moment, because this is kind of new. I was wondering, Steve, as well, whether, we could have a tenant, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be a Wakefield Housing Authority
Correct,
tenant.
correct. We're saying the
We
same
could
thing,
expand that out and say, perhaps a Section 8, someone who holds a Section 8 designation residing in Wakefield, or someone who's maybe on one of those lists.
Yeah.
Waiting, who's a
Or
Wakefieldian.
not, they may not want to apply to.
May not want to
Just
apply,
being-
but I was wondering if we could expand that category. Just thought I'd bring that up and see what the councilors thought in terms of what we should do with that. One category, we could just make it 3 members of the public. Councilor Chine.
And this is just sort of thinking off the top of my head. I look at those almost as 2 separate things. So I think there is a lot of value in making sure that we have some representation from someone who is renting. I mean, when you look at our adjudicatory boards, when you look at all of our boards, I mean, we skew very heavily to homeowners, which is fine, but when we're talking about housing, I mean, that's only half of the story. So I like the idea of expanding the members of the public to 3, with the caveat that hopefully if we could find a renter as one of those 3, I think that would be helpful. But I also think there's value in having someone who is engaged with the system through the Housing Authority or through Section 8 in some way. And so maybe a way of thinking about it is we continue to have this sort of Housing Authority tenant piece of it, but there's also, again, a 3rd member of the public, who's sort of a tenant at large.
Any other thoughts from the councilors?
So, could I just understand, Mr. Chairman, so we're talking about one of the steep things for that, the Wakefield Housing Authority generally, and then the second recommendation is Wakefield Housing Authority tenants. Would we not be better off having Wakefield Housing Authority represented and then having a spot, just a tenant in Wakefield generally?
So my suggestion is that you do both. I mean, I think the Wakefield Housing Authority perspective, I'm assuming that's from the Housing Authority board or management as opposed to a Housing Authority resident. I think those are 2 different things. And again, I think there's a different perspective between a Housing Authority tenant and, a tenant from the community who may be in a market rate situation. So
Well,
just
could that
to
be
clarify,
achieved,
that was my suggestion. I mean, the council can agree or disagree, but that was my rationale.
I just feel like we should keep it open-ended because, I mean, this is a housing production plan, which can take on a number of different forms. It's not limited to Wakefield Housing Authority type housing production solely. That's certainly a part of this and maybe a very, very large part of this potentially. But I think that if we just kept it open-ended so that we see applicants as they come. And if we have housing authority applicants, housing authority tenants that want to do it, if we have tenants in market rate housing, if we have, whatever the case might be, I think giving that flexibility allows us to make the decision of what we think the composition should look like.
So, I mean, if I may, I think that is the intent, but I feel like if you don't ask for it, you don't necessarily get it. And I want to make sure that we do have that sort of diversity of experience when we're coming in, but I'll let others chime in.
Councilor Carney?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing, in my opinion. When usually people get into the housing authority, whether it be under Section 8 or they're elderly, they're usually experts on renting. They don't just come from selling a house and moving in there. So these people have been through things, probably had their application on in 5 or 6 different towns. And so I think they're the same person we're talking about here. Because they have expertise on renting in the private sector as well as going into public housing.
Would your thought process there be similar then to Councilor Chines, or you think three tenant members at large would do it?
I would think we advertise in a way that you say, whether you be a homeowner or a tenant, please apply, and then pick the best candidates to serve. And, if they come from a housing authority, that'd be great. It wouldn't matter to me one way or the other, because I think they've already lived their life looking for housing.
Right.
And they got a lot of experience at it once they've got into public housing.
Any other thoughts down the table? Councilor Vincent?
Thank you, Chair McLean. The Wakefield Housing Authority would have 1 spot on the committee. there are 5 members of the Wakefield Housing Community. 3 of them are elected. One of them is the state-appointed representative, although we had to appoint that position because the state failed to do so last year. And the 5th one is a tenant representative. So it's possible that the WHA representative to the committee could be, 1 in 5 chance, the tenant representative. But I do think that there's merit to what Councilor Chines is saying about wanting to make sure that we do have representation, kind of broad-based representation from renters. Especially because the Affordable Housing Trust Fund also has a spot on there. And with the money that was allocated in the ARPA back in March, that $200,000 is being used in part for renters assistance, first-time home buyer closing costs, and things like that. So I think having robust participation of tenants in the process is advisable to me.
Would you have a feeling for the composition, whether 3 renters would be enough, or whether you'd like to see a particular WHA tenant position?
Well, I don't think all 3 at large, the public at large, have to be renters. But I think if we, depends on the applicants that come in, if we got 1 renter from the pool of the public at large, and then a WHA tenant, we'd have at least 2 renters. And possibly 3 if the WHA representative happens to be the tenant representative. So we'd have 2 or 3 under that scenario. So.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Could I just make the suggestion that we just make it 3 residents? Because it's very there isn't a homeowner that's specifically designated amongst this group. So I mean, I think homeowners that add a lot of perspective as well. So I think just having it broad, 3 residents of Wakefield, be it renters, owners, whatever the case might be, and then we can make the decision based upon the applicant pool we have. We know what we're looking to achieve here, or we can have further discussions about it, but let's keep it as broad-based as we can for now.
Councilor Jones.
I mean, I'm not worried about having homeowner representation on the committee because we will have homeowner representation on the committee. I mean, all 7 members of the town council are homeowners and one of us will be on the committee. All 5 members of the planning board are homeowners and one of them will be on the committee. I feel very confident that whether we advertise for 2 or 3 community members, that applicant pool will skew towards homeowners because it generally does for everything that we apply for. And so I do think that we have to be more deliberate about making sure that we have the voices of renters on the committee. And I think that given that the movement, the sort of the challenge of finding housing does skew much more heavily towards renters who cannot afford to purchase a home, I think there's some intentionality we just need to be mindful of. You know, if we were a heavily rental community and there was a concern that we wouldn't have any homeowners, I would absolutely agree, but I feel the likelihood of that happening, just again, even knowing the composition of 2 of the appointing, or 2 of the representative boards that will be part of this, feels very, very low that we won't have that homeowner perspective.
Councilor Vincent.
Thank you, Chair McLean. I think the other thing that we have to consider is how many members of the town council do we want on this? There's been discussion about 1. I actually think there's some merit to having 2 members of the town council to serve on the housing production plan. I think the town council needs to take a significant lead on getting the housing production plan done, and I think having a representation of 2, to me, would be optimal, vice just having 1 member of the town council. It's just my opinion.
And just to interject on that, I have 1 person who has indicated an interest, a strong interest. I don't believe I have a second person, but I'd be happy to appoint that second person. When we get to that point, I think we're close, you know, to getting to the composition of the.
The goal to have is.
Bob Vincent is definitely going to be on it.
He's indicated it. He's indicated an interest.
I didn't say anything tonight.
He's the one.
Just talked about how many members we have in town council. I didn't say who should be on it.
I've been to 3 meetings, he's mentioned that.
It's good to be clear.
Sounds like he's dragging people onto the lifeboat. But around this, but the goal for the housing production plan is to have this, done by what, February or March of next year?
What's our timeline, Steve?
Yeah, if not sooner, but yes.
Right, and I guess my concern around us dithering about who, what, let's, I always am a big fan. I think we should have some sort of tenant representation on the committee. I do think that if we're looking for 3 people, we were looking for 3 middle schoolers for the youth council, not to presage this, but we only got 2. So it's tough to get people. So, there is some merits to Ed's point about, having it be broad-based and just making sure that in the selection process, you skew things towards a renter or having it be, or you can have it be defined. I'm somewhat indifferent about it. I'd like to see us let's get to 3 first, and then figure out what we're doing after that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I think we're all saying the same thing in a way. We advertise and we encourage renters to apply, because there may not be a market out there about renters wanting to participate. And renters are in a different position usually. I'm not saying all renters, no broad, painting with a broad brush here, but they may not want to participate. Certainly there's a couple of people up at the housing authority who would, but I'm saying the average renter in the town of Wakefield might be just making ends meet, don't have the time to commit to something like this. So we advertise it, encourage them, and so we look at the applicants, and we get some good applicants, then we put a committee together to help Bob get this done. Yeah.
I also think it would be good for us to have more than one person on the committee, especially because this is something that I know it's slated to be done by early '25, but we should have a plan in place in case it is not done by that point, that you have adequate, and by the way, housing is the thing that we all will get, brought to the carpet about by all of our constituents. So we should take a prominent role there.
And
Would be my opinion.
I'll just say, we're not dithering, because you're not getting out of here without a vote.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I was going to say, so maybe to that end, to try to bring us to a vote, I'd like to make a motion to approve the plan for the Housing Production Plan Committee as presented with 2 changes. One, that there be 3 members of the public at large, and that the council make an effort to balance that membership between homeowners and renters. And 2, that there be 2 appointees from the town council, so that Councilor Vincent can have
Second that motion.
some friends.
Seconded by Councilor Carney. Any discussion on the motion?
Could I just add, Mr. Chairman, that something that, there's a population we're also missing in all of this, and we're talking about owners and renters. There are also a good number, and this reason I said residents, there's a good number of people who live in Wakefield and who live with family because they can't find a way to live on their own in Wakefield. And so that's a segment of our community that I think is getting ignored in some of this, because it's quick to say renters and owners. Well, there is that third group of folks too. And they're often young folks. They're all often young professionals who can't find a way to make it work with a down payment, for instance. And so they may not constitute renters in the classical sense, and they're certainly not homeowners. So they're aspirants at this point.
Well, I think if somebody living at home applied and shared in any expense at all, be it food or whatever, I think they should still be considered.
My experience is they're renters that pay very little rent.
Yes, or renters paying sub-market rent.
Yeah. But to piggyback off of Councilor Dombrowski's point, it's a really excellent point, and I think, we talk about it as adult children, but it's also older adults. I mean, it's also people who can't afford to downsize, who, are staying with family. It's multi-generational families where you have grandparents raising grandchildren. I do think there's a lot of that in Wakefield. I don't know how to kind of get at that. But I hope that through the combination of folks that we appoint to this, that is something that we have some conversations about, because it there's a certain amount of kind of economic stagnancy that freezes a lot of people in place in situations that maybe aren't what they thought that they would be in. And I think that's a topic we've got to talk about.
Yeah, but I think your motion was public at large with the understanding that Councilor Carney mentioned,
Yeah.
which would encompass, I think, the vice chair's comments, that we're going to look at the applicant pool and try to make it diverse.
I should add to that fact that we all know, and Bob, I say in jest when I talk about even the fact that I know you've carried the ball on this one, right? I compliment you for that. The issue here is, we gotta get it done by March, and we want the best committee we can get. That's the important thing. People who work with us and get the job done. That's my point.
Any further discussion on the motion?
Just one
Yes.
question for Clerk Dalton. Are we able to, on the application form, ask people to kind of self-identify in terms of their living situation, homeowner, renter, living with family, or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, we can do something like that, absolutely.
Great, thank you.
So,
Okay, seeing no further discussion, I'll take a roll call vote, starting with Councilor Dombrowski,
Aye.
Councilor Butler,
Aye.
Councilor Vincent.
Yes.
Councilor Butt,
Yes.
Councilor Chines.
Yes.
Councilor Carney.
Yes.
And I am yes, that's 7-0. Madam Clerk? And moving on to item 5C, the American Rescue Plan Act, otherwise known as ARPA. I believe the town administrator has a few slides.
Few slides. I was told to keep them as few as possible, so I'm going to do my best. Again, where we started, Wakefield's share of the ARPA funds was a little over $8 million, and that is because although the town got 2.8, the rest of the country is a county system. So Wakefield basically got what Wakefield's share of the Middlesex County would have been, to be fair, nationwide. Town council took a number of votes, as did town meeting. We've all seen these before, used in fiscal 22, fiscal 23, and fiscal 24. Some programs we put in, and then we weaned off of ARPA as we went forward. We spent a lot on prevention, first responder overtime during the dark days, I would say, test kits, clinics, and extra money for elections and town meetings. I think you may recall that we spent a lot of money distancing people and putting outdoor televisions and things like that. Fire department overtime. One thing we did slide in was the fit court in May of 2022, and I see it gets a lot of use. Unfortunately, not enough by me, but maybe that's something I can change shortly. We then did a number of approvals at the end of 2022. Again, going back to the town council, I think we did a number of iterations on what we might want to do. The Energy Assistance Fund, and we required, this helped 208 families, by the way, in Wakefield. We made sure that these families also worked with either Leo or LIHEAP or the state, so we kind of doubled up on them. When I put this slide together last week, of that 194,802 had been expended. In the warrant that came out today, which was the last one, delay being that the state took a while in approving some of the applicants. There was another $3,300. So that amount is 198,102. It still leaves a little over 200,000 that the council said around there would go to the Economic Development Committee. We'll talk. Excuse me, to the Housing Trust.
Housing Trust.
And that's on the next. That's on one of the further slides. Lake Quanah Powered Cleanup in the Vets Field area. That we did not like the bids that came in for the bathroom and the cleanup of that area. That money will be is being rebid. We will know this fall, and that money will be under contract by the end of this year. And it's important that money is under contract by that. The Lake Pathways, number 1. Think of this around the yacht club and is it Fielding? What's the other street?
Yeah, kind of yacht club.
Yacht Club North. Bill Renault will actually be back on the 12th with a plan and cost for that. August 12th. Of that, 11,000 was spent on surveying. Rail trail mobility, we've spent the $1 million on that. Tree replacement, all that money will be under contract by the end of this year. I will note that we did get some additional state money that we actually had to use first because it was a shorter time frame. But Dennis and DPW is aware of that. Sidewalk expansion, that's the last number that I have, but you're seeing that go all over town, so that's going to be done. They're pouring now on Vernon Street, so that'll all be done by the end of the year. WCAT expenses, that's been done for a while. I think there's $200-300 left over there. Continued, the MWI water truck that was spent on, the conference rooms and Zoom upgrades that is working very well on the conference room next to me that a lot of people are using in the first one downstairs. ADA swing done, Civil War monument evaluation, came right almost on the exact money. And the title searches, we talked about those tonight, they're all done. So we put $25,000 in the till for that, and we spent a little over 21. So total of that, original 6, about 4,500 was spent, or 75% at this point.
4.5 million.
4.5 million. Inspire Cafe, that was voted on by the town council on March 11th. That has all been spent, or all been sent over there. You can see they're building on that, excuse me, right now. Assessment of historic structures, we have not expended any of that money. I'll come back to that in the final slide, or on the second final slide. So we continue to move on what has been spent here. The small business fund that we did, this was on March 25th. I went through a long meeting with the council about how this money was going to be expended. $1 million put into the small business fund. Of that, I think 400,000 of that within their own thought process of the small business fund has been allocated for facade and signage, and 60,000 for digital marketing. I will tell you that in this area and some of the others, we are going to have to sign a memorandum of understanding, and I'll go over that a little bit later on. Food pantry, that $40,000 check will be cut next week or two. It's already been sent into accounting, so that's all done. Those of you that got to see, and that's for general operations, whatever they wanted. But I will tell you that their annexes really came out good, so if you haven't had a chance to see it, please do, because it really is going to help a lot of their programs, particularly their outreach programs, where they can fill up right there and take some of the food on the road. Senior center renovations, I will tell you that at this point, $27,000 has been spent. Frankly, our biggest hang-up here is going to be on what type of windows we're going to get. And these windows are going to go anywhere from, here's my notes on that one. In working with the Historical Commission, these windows are going to run anywhere between $850, which I don't think are the ones we're going to get per window, and the 60 of them. Probably we'll land on those windows that are going to be $1,800 a window, and there are 60 of them. To go for a wood window, there would be $6,000 per window, which would eat up all of that money. So we're going to have to work with the to come up with something that looks very historical. I think that Joe Conway and Chris Pierce have done a great job in coming up with something that I hope will be agreeable to the Historical Commission, and we've actually had some drive-bys and things like that. Sidewalk extensions, you will see more of those as the year goes on, before the end of the year. Lake Quannapowa pedestrian access, I am working with the representatives for both. This is kind of from Hall Park, kind of towards the yacht, more towards the yacht club. I've been working with the representative for both of the cemeteries, and I will hear back from what their answers are next week, Jonathan, so we'll find out on that. But between the cemeteries and DEP, that money may be a little bit, that may be a candidate for reallocation, because we may just not be able to come to an agreement with both of those places. I thought I'd give you a little bit of a look at what's happening at the senior center. Walls are being plastered. You can see the old windows there. No walls are coming down, so there will be a number of rooms there. They are cleaned out though, so all the stuff that was in there, for those of you who took the tour, the stuff has been moved. It's no longer there. And you can see some wiring, actually doing some wiring and setting drops for internet and things like that. The stage, we will be doing, I guess, some town council show when this is all done. is still remaining, and you can see a little bit of the plastering being done there. So there's some exciting space, and I know that Karen Burke is really excited about utilizing the space for a lot of activities for the seniors. There are, particularly all seniors, but looking at putting in one area a ping pong table and a pool table. Particularly have a lot of veterans that come that are looking for that sort of thing. Now there's room for it, and she wants to make one of them, I think, more of a card room so they can use the cafeteria more. So there's a lot of that that goes on there. So she's very exciting, and between that and some of the dance and athletic classes, she's very excited about utilizing that space, and that is a well-used facility, as you guys all know, because you've been there. So through this all, I was concerned about a number of things, or a couple of things, I should say. One of which was that a contract must be signed or money must be expended by 12/31/24. And so in the cases of if you're buying, if you're doing sidewalks, it's pretty easy. We'll have a contract signed. Sidewalks. If you're putting in a prefab bathroom, that's pretty easy. We'll have a contract signed for that. However, when you're looking at money that's going to either particularly the Affordable Housing Trust or the business function here, that's a little bit more tricky. So what I did is I reached out to our auditors who had been kind of making me kind of aware of this, and as luck had it, there was a PowerPoint presentation that the Treasury did in May of '24, which was really great because we had to help us to get here today. And basically the key word is obligate. How do we say these funds have been obligated? Number one is easy, contract must be signed by 12/31 or money spent. And the second one is memorandums of understanding. So the Treasury did clarify some of their rules, and I was interested in whether a memorandum of understanding between departments counted as an obligation. And they also talked about flexibility to cover cost increases, and that's really not going to affect us here either way. But so if the town council were to sign a memorandum of understanding with the Affordable Housing Trust, would that count as an obligation? And the answer is yes. So what that interagency agreement needs to be signed by 12/31/24, which is pretty easy, and obligate is highlighted there or bolded because it needs to be done. The government agency must expend that money in 2025 and 2026, so you get a 2-year cushion to do that. It imposes conditions on the use of funds by the recipient agency, department, or part of government. So Housing Trust, for example, what that memorandum of understanding will say is that the town council is granting you, it's called $200,000 in this case, and you will use it for these items, which are going to basically mirror what is the charge of the Housing Trust, whether it's rental assistance or first-time buyer programs or development of property, what have you, and that money needs to be used within the next 2 years. So poses conditions, has specific requirements that follows a scope, is signed by the parties, so the town council will sign it and the Housing Trust will sign it. It does not disclaim binding effect or state that it doesn't create rights or obligations. Now, that's not my language. That is pulled right out of there because I think it's horrible language. But basically that means, in my mind, is that we can't say, yeah, this really didn't make any obligation on us. We can use it for whatever we want. So they have to use it actually for the funds, for the manners it was given to them. And the use of fund is reported quarterly. I'm doing that here with the council, as you know, and I would want that to come back to me from the other agencies. And it could be, hey, we didn't spend any in the first quarter of 2000, calendar year 25. That's okay, but let's just make sure that it's done. And the funds were expended by December 31st, 2026. In one community, the Treasury accepted in one community a memorandum of understanding signed between the town council and the select board or whoever and the town manager that the funds would be used to implement a public safety program. So that was between the board and the town manager. That was acceptable, which I thought was kind of interesting. But I'm glad I'm not signing any of these in any event. So Tom Mullen and I have been working on the MOUs. I gave the first draft, and Tom was actually very kind, I think. He goes, I just have a few suggestions. So those will be coming probably at the next meeting to everybody. But again, we have plenty of time. And also in there is it's set up that if some additional funds went to those two entities for some reason, that we could just put that in as an addendum. So that should be all good. So I thought about some items that we have talked about reallocating. And in speaking to the chair, this is something that would like to have the council consider on the 12th. Again, there's no rush on this stuff, but some of it we may want to move out so we can get them into an MOU. The energy assistance to the housing trust, that was already voted on 324, so 200,000, and we're right at that, so that came out great. You notice that the WCAT expenses, they put in for less. I just think we should, I don't want to even leave anything to go back to the federal government, so that may be money we can use. The Civil War Monument evaluation, that came $150 shorter than that. The title searches, I think they're all done. We have $37.50 left. I think I would reallocate that to somewhere else. And the assessment of historic structures, in talking to DPW, they feel that where we had to assess the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, because that was we don't have another monument like that, or a structure like that in Wakefield. You had a lot of different statues on it. They had to actually get a lift to review them, take them down. It cost money to do that assessment. The others, whether it's the Wakefield Museum, or the Hiker at the Rockery, or Hartshorn House, for instance, those will all be done, even the bandstand was done just via not a real assessment, but just a bid process. Hey, what do you think it's going to cost us to fix the roof of the Westwood Schoolhouse? We don't need to go through a whole assessment of that. So I think that may be an area that would be good for reallocation, because the estimate for those costs is going to be free and part of the deal. And I mentioned the Lake Q pedestrian access. I just don't know if that wonderful thought on going all around close to the lake will even be workable between the DEP issues with the lake and going through some of the land area in between, Hall Park and the lake that is owned by two private cemeteries. So when you add all these things up, not the 200,000, because that was already accounted for, you come up with 179, 135. That may be a consideration for reallocation that I can bring back on the 12th. And those with the MOUs, I think we are in really good shape at this time. I think you're going to see a lot of money expended over the next few months, and thank you.
I just want to add that I would like the council to consider, based on what we hear, for example, on that 150, if we hear that that is a no-go, I would ask for a motion at our next meeting to allocate that as seed money to the solar project on the Galvin Middle School, for a couple of reasons. First of all, we have another print that I've asked town administrator to send to you all. It's basically the same thing we had for the full array from Soltech last time, which is just inside of $1 million, which would be a payback of roughly 4 years. I think since we are now following the path of going on a warrant, it would be beneficial to have seed money in that project when we go to town meeting and ask for basically the ability to borrow further money. If it's 150, if it's $1 million less the 150, I think it'll be a quicker payback period. I think it would show the town meeting that we've got skin in the game, and that the payback period would even be shorter. And we're hoping to get that passed, I think, based on everything I heard when we did our last reallocation of ARPA funds. I would suspect too that the 25,000 could be for a specific project that town administrator will come up with, which may be a roof for the West Warwick School or something that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do to a historical structure. So I would say, you know, be ready based on what we learned for, I will entertain motions and expect votes on these because I want to keep these funds moving. That's for next meeting. Any other comments from counselors or questions relative to ARPA? Counselor Chines?
Just a question on process on the MOUs. Is the expectation that those will be ready for us to sign next month, or what's the
That's
timing?
my hope.
Okay.
My hope, yeah. I mean, I've already put one draft together that Tommy and I have gone over, and it's almost basically ready to roll, so.
And just as we look at some of the other items, I know the expectation is that we'll have them all obligated by the end of the
Yeah.
year, but I guess where, from your perspective, where's sort of the break point where we have to say, okay, you know, we haven't spent or we haven't obligated
New
X?
Year's Eve?
Okay.
No, I think that, I think that when we come back in for the September, October, that third quarter
Okay.
would be my break point. But I think even in, let's say, you know, tree replacement, for instance, we're gonna have a contract signed.
Okay.
That's my plan, or have a lot of them in. Same thing with Lake Q. So I think that,
So even with the rebid for Lake Q?
yeah, even with that,
Okay.
I'm very confident, and they know that we need to have that contract signed by then.
Okay.
Because that was really a pretty exciting one, I thought.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I did think about that, we'd have a special meeting in December. If we had to.
If we have to make sure that we
That we
we're
save the
able
money,
to
yeah, but
use
no,
the
I
funds,
don't.
absolutely.
No, I don't
Right now,
think
we
so.
have one meeting in December, isn't that correct?
That's normal, yeah.
Yeah, well, we're going to try to keep it at that. Counselor Butler?
And this is a question for Steve. I know you noticed you were planning to pull back the unspent money from the Energy Assistance Fund.
That was a vote of the council, yes.
The question is could, in terms of thinking about that and your small business fund and your other, like, who is the small business fund, we do an MOU to extend that out to 26?
Exactly, yeah. The town council created a committee.
Yeah.
And that Counselor Dombrowski is a liaison to that committee, as is Counselor Butt. So yes, will be an MOU with that committee.
Right, and so on the energy assistance one, is there a reason why we wouldn't buy ourselves to get to 2026 instead of?
Well, that
Scraping that money back?
energy assistance fund, the council voted to take that, to reallocate, already voted to reallocate the money that was left over, right around 200,000, which is what we thought it was gonna be.
Okay.
And that's going to the housing trust.
Okay, so it's already spent.
Yeah.
As a member of the Housing Trust, I'd also just, report that so far we haven't made any moves on mortgages or soft seconds. The first thing we're focusing on, and our senior planner, Samantha Elliott, is working on, is renter's assistance. And that's what we're focusing on at the moment for the use of the ARPA funds that are being reallocated. And I know that members of this council were very interested in renter's assistance, so I just wanted to mention that. Any other questions for town administrator, comments? Are we ready to move on to item 6? Seeing none. Item 6 is town meeting action. I'm going to give this one to the town administrator.
I think I'll start, and I think Tom Mullen might jump in. So we may remember that in Article 15 at the April town meeting, by a vote of 240 to 49, and for all of those that tease me, you can check my book. It's right in there. It's written down in there, the book from town meeting. The town voted to authorize the town council to accept an easement for a retaining wall that was on the corner of Greenwood Street and Hickory Hill Road. That easement was presented to the town pursuant to a special permit from the Board of Appeals that required that easement to be presented to the town. And it's really in it really isn't, it would be come into play if the wall collapsed, then the owner of the lot is, or if they voluntarily raise the wall, they shall rebuild it at their sole cost, at the expense of of themselves. However, if the town decided if they ever expanded sidewalks over there, because that area, I think, is devoid of sidewalks, and they wanted to move the wall, we had the ability to do that. So that was explained at town meeting and was voted on by a vote of, as I said, 240 to 49. I know that Tom Mullen has gone over with the attorney for the developer and has an acceptance of easements in a acceptable form to both him. I reviewed it as well. That does exactly what town meeting says. So I don't know if you know that.
Yes, the grant of easement is gratuitous, that is, there's a nominal dollar consideration. And it does not obligate the town to do anything. We never have to build a wall, but if we choose to, then we can build the wall entirely on the grantor's property. And as with the acceptance of any easement, this requires a vote of the town council and the signature of at least a majority of the councilors.
So we would be looking to entertain a motion to accept the easement.
Yep.
Yes. So moved.
Moved by Counselor Chines. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Carney. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote, starting with Counselor Dombrowski,
Aye.
Counselor Butler,
Yes.
Counselor Vincent,
Yes.
Counselor Butt,
Yes.
Counselor Chines.
Yes.
Counselor Carney,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Sherry, that's 7-0 to accept the easement. And we will now start signing with wet signatures, I believe.
We are, yes.
You want the old fashioned one?
Everything's digital nowadays.
Thank you.
We are okay, Steve, without Ed's signature?
Yeah.
We haven't, what we need here?
Yep, you just need a majority, council.
Coming at you.
Thank you.
Item 7 is appointments of the Youth Council. Who is leading off with this? Oh, Counselor Carney.
Yeah, I sent a message out to everybody, and I was, directed by, not directed, but advised by Steve. I probably shouldn't have sent that message out to everybody, but I didn't realize at last meeting, I thought that was public information. And when I saw it again, it's kind of disturbing because, the situation that I explained in my email. I have no problem with the way it's going now, but I do think that in the future, we ought to take a look at how these positions are appointed, because I just don't have a clear picture here of how this happened and why it happened. But I'm fine with it now. I just was afraid of some young person being hurt by the process.
Well, it seems like we have 3 different options here from what I've seen. Is that everybody's understanding?
Yeah, that is.
Okay. Did the liaison have any thoughts on,
Sure. So I had met with Ali Atui, who is the head of the Youth Council, and we had several conversations around the membership and the size of the membership. And actually, there seemed to be some dissonance because I think when the Youth Council was created, it had was done so under a premise of 8 high schoolers and 3 middle schoolers, which I think it never actually had. It had 9 high schoolers, I think, in its first iteration in 2020. And since then, the number has fluctuated. Generally, it's been around 11 voting high schoolers, and up to 3 voting middle schoolers, and then had some. It has varied in terms of the number of non-voting members that have been included. The reason to not have everyone is because then you have quorum problems, and you have problems of getting a meeting and developing a meeting. So there are 3 recommendations. One is the traditional structure, which has been 11 voting high school members, 3 voting middle school members, 1 non-voting member currently as an alternate, and that was picked from, I believe there were 14 high school applicants for the position, is it 14? Yeah, I believe it's 14 high school applicants in total. In the past, the committee has varied. We have had times when we didn't accept everyone, and the youth council has also had times when we've had up to 5 non-voting members, which is why we wanted to lay it out for. So Model A is what the youth council chair and their sort of their faculty liaisons and whatnot had originally set it up for, which was 11 high schoolers, 3 middle school members, 1 non-voting member. In talking with Ali, I thought that seemed to be a reasonable approach to this, and I understand, you don't want people to be hurt or to be discouraged, but I will say this, the other thing is in every other line, or not in every other, but in any number of other lines of student participation, be it theater, be it athletics, you do have people who aren't picked, and that's okay. But we also want to encourage participation in sort of the political process. So I think I am fine with having there only be 11 or really 12 members of the youth council from the high school. But if we did want to offer up that if we wanted to have all of the people who had wanted to be considered accepted, we would have it as, we would have a total of, I believe, probably existing, the number would be 16, and then we're looking for a 17th in terms of middle school members. So the Model B would be if we were going to stick to the original letter of the law, which we haven't done for the past 3 or 4 years, and had only 8 high schoolers and 3 middle schoolers. That was their selection of who the 8 would be.
Did the teacher liaison
The teacher
chime in
liaison,
on this?
he did not chime in.
Would the quorum be based on the voting members or the total?
Voting members.
Voting members only?
Voting members
So
only.
the non-voting members wouldn't
Non-voting.
affect the quorum?
They would not affect the quorum.
It's interesting because, one of the rationales for the non-C plan, the non-large plan, was that you're creating some kind of inequity between voting and non-voting members because you might have to focus on getting the voting members into the meeting. Having done some scheduling in the middle of snowstorms with people flying from all over the country, I understand the concept and how difficult it can be, and the high school kids are all very busy. But when I saw that rationale, I said, well, right off the bat, there's kind of an inequity between a voting member and a non-voting member to begin with. It is what it is.
That's.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to, it's making sure, you want to have people have access and some degree of participation, but you also want to make sure that the people who are participating care about it enough and are committed to the process. So if I was voting, I would, and I believe Steve and I discussed, Steve is more of the wide tent. And that's a fine way to have it in terms of having us accept all the 14 people who are. listed on
Okay.
option C.
I appreciate you looking into it, appreciate your input. Did, Counselor Dombrowski, was your hand up?
It is, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to offer a little bit of historical perspective here too. We had originally established this youth council as Councilor Butler indicated, and then they came to us about expanding the voting members, so we did that. And then they came to us and said they were having issues with attendance, so they were having issues meeting quorum. So then we dropped that number down again. I believe, Madam Clerk, that was the sequencing. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
So I would be really reluctant. I think it may have been you, Mr. Chairman, making the point that high schoolers are quite busy. I'd be really reluctant to create a large number of voting members that could lead them to potentially not be able to meet quorum. I think that's an important thing for them to be able to have and also understand the importance of. So I feel like the model we've had historically, where we've encouraged voting members to be a part of this, has worked just fine. Oftentimes, it seems like voting members have been newer to the council, and then over time, they work their way to a not voting members come to the council and work their way to a voting member. So I think any kind of scenario whereby we create that, I actually think something along the lines of Model C, just bearing in mind that that's going to be 17 people participating, which I know those of us who have been on FinCom, that's a lot of voices. That's a big group. But I think if we get voting members up into like 14, which Model A proposes, I think that creates a real recipe for quorum issues. And so I would not encourage that based upon our own lived experience with the youth council since its inception. So I think
Ed, I think you've had 14 voting members for the past 3 years.
Are you? No, because we've adjusted the numbers.
No, I know you've adjusted it, but the numbers that I have in front of me are that it was.
We were at like 17, I think, voting at one point. And then we came back down to, right? Is that right, Sherry? I think we were at 17 voting, and then we came back down to 4.
Yeah, I think in 2022 we were close to 20. I think, yeah.
Yeah, close
yeah.
to 20 voting, right?
Yeah.
No,
So we
in
had
2020, it looks like you had 8 voting high school, 3 voting middle school, 5 non-voting. In 2021, it looked like you had 17 voting, including 6 voting middle school, and 4 non-voting high school. You've always had 11 voting high school, is what you've always had. You've always had 11 voting high school, other than that first one in 2020. And then your voting middle school, I guess you've sort of let anybody in on the middle school, because if you're in, you really don't want to say no to people just starting out. But yeah, the middle school numbers look like is where you've made adjustments. The high school numbers have been 11, 2023, 2022, 2021. Like, you've been 11 high school voting members for 3 years plus now. So I don't think...
So the difference has been middle school.
Yeah, it was like 5 voting in middle school in 21. It's 2 voting in middle school in 22. It's 3 voting in middle school in 23. I think it's you let the people, if anybody applies in middle school, they get on. No, if you're staying up, kids, to watch this, that's a tip to yourselves. But that seems, I didn't want you to think like, creating 8, like you wanted to make sure we stuck with the 8 voting. We haven't been at 8 voting since the inception.
I mean, I think like model. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think 17, 20 people around the table seems like a lot of folks.
Yeah.
Personally, so in some ways, model. I don't know. I don't have a strong feeling on it. All I know is that there are quorum issues, and I think there's a practicality to this we should also bear in mind.
Yeah. So it's 16 or 17 in Model C, and it's 12 in Model A. And that's the number of voting members remains the same, 11 max.
I guess if the non-voting members don't affect the quorum though, and the understanding is that, if we're having a meeting, the voting members' schedules kind of come first,
Yeah.
that, you know, at least it might allow the non-voting members to have an activity, to participate in, maybe not in every meeting, to have something else on their resume in the often competitive enterprise of ferreting out high school activities. Just some thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable, I mean, I am open to A or C. I think, I don't think we should go back to B. I don't think we should accept B, and I think he might have even had a proposal of making it a standard 11, but we can table that. But I think we should probably vote today on, do we want to make it do you want it as expansive as possible and have it be 16 or 17, which, you know, I think the chair was a little concerned with? Or do you, but if you don't want, so the chair's concerns over managing a group versus the desire to increase participation. Really, you know, everything in this life, it's a yin and a yang. So we have to choose which one we balance. I guess I opted for Model A, but I'm not going to be upset if the group as a whole decides that having much greater participation is more beneficial.
Okay. Does anyone feel strongly enough to make a motion as to whether they are in favor of A or C, and we can see how the vote goes? I don't know if there's a unanimous feeling, otherwise I'd say, well, it looks like we're going towards A or C.
Well, I'll make a motion towards the inclusivity, even though I said I'll make a motion that we accept the Model C as laid out with, ask me to make motions, with 8 high school and 3 middle school voting members and 6 non-voting voting members as listed in the Youth Council composition structure and member recommendations.
Seconded.
We have a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll go to a roll call vote. Counselor Dombrowski.
Aye.
Counselor Butler.
No.
Counselor Vincent.
Yes.
Counselor Butt.
Yes.
Counselor Chines.
Abstain.
Abstains. Counselor Carney.
Yes.
And I am a yes. I believe we have 1 abstention and 1 negative, which
Okay.
probably means we have 5 positive.
Good math there, Mike.
Thank you. Try not to dither over here. In which
Is that a
case,
victory for yin or yang?
you have a kind of unknown, I have no idea. Moving on to 7B, Inspector of Plumbing and Gas Vacation Replacement, which hopefully will not be terribly controversial.
Yes, Mr. Chair, move to, sorry, I'm waiting for my computer to come up. Move to appoint Bruno Federiconi as the temporary inspector for plumbing and gas.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Second by Counselor Carney. Any discussion? We'll go to the roll call vote. Seeing no discussion, Counselor Dombrowski.
Aye.
Counselor Butler.
Yes.
Counselor Vincent.
Yes.
Counselor Butt.
Yes.
Counselor Chines.
Yes.
Counselor Carney.
Yes.
And McLean is yes, so that's 7-0. Madam Clerk, thank you all very much for that quick action. Item 8 is donations. We have donations to the Council on Aging.
Mr. Chair, move to accept the $150 in donations to the Council on Aging from various donors with thanks.
Second?
Seconded by Counselor Carney. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Counselor Dombrowski.
Aye.
Counselor Butler.
Yep.
Counselor Vincent.
Yes.
Counselor Butt.
Yes.
Counselor Chines.
Yes.
Counselor Carney.
Yes.
And Counselor McLean is yes, that's 7-0. Sherry. And we have donations to the library.
Mr. Chair, move to accept $433 in donations to the library from various donors with thanks.
Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Counselor Butt. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Counselor Dombrowski.
Aye.
Counselor Butler,
Yes.
Counselor Vincent,
Yes.
Counselor Butt,
Yes.
Counselor Chines.
Yes.
Counselor Carney,
Yes.
and myself is a yes, that's 7-0. Sherry. Now, for the exciting part of the evening, item 9, warrants.
Oh, I thought I'd talk about housing production plan. John,
You,
warrant, warrant number 48, 7.268 million. 3.564 million of that is town council that relates to the new Wakefield Memorial High School expenses. The other two significant ones were Public Works and the Light Department. Warrant number 50 is 6.730 million and change. The significant portion of that is the group insurance adjustments, the school department, and Public Works. Warrant number 51, what's interesting about this, if you notice, all the warrants are even numbers because they save the odd numbers in case an expense comes up, and this is an example. So the warrant number 51 was actually used this time. The total was $6,300 by the tax collector. That was a special check for postage that had to be issued so the tax collector could mail out real estate tax bills. And the last warrant article was warrant number 52. That was 3.206 million, and most of that came from the treasurer. That's all I have. Thank you.
thank you, Counselor Vincent. Item 10, approval of minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from June 26, 2024.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Carney. Need a roll call vote on minutes, Steve, probably?
Yeah.
Roll call vote, Counselor Dombrowski,
Aye.
Counselor Butler,
Yes.
Counselor Vincent,
Yes.
Counselor Butt,
Yes.
Counselor Chines.
Yes.
Counselor Carney,
Yes.
and Counselor McLean is yes. That's 7-0 Sherry on the minutes. Any announcements this evening? Counselor Chines.
Thank you. I just wanted to, first of all, just share a few really big thank yous to all the people that made the 4th of July festivities here in Wakefield possible. I mean, it is a boatload of work for the Wakefield Police Department. I don't think anyone is allowed to take the day off. The Wakefield Fire Department, the DPW had the common looking, you know, like nothing happened probably within 24 hours. And so really just great work by them in terms of making the festivities happen and making sure that everyone had a safe day. Also did want to acknowledge just the amazing group of volunteers that we have that pull all of this together. The Wakefield Independence Day Committee for organizing the parade, particularly outgoing chairman Brian Fox. I think he's made it very clear that this is his last parade as chair, so he leaves some pretty big shoes to fill for the next person, but excellent work to him and everyone on the committee. And likewise to the West Side Social Club for the activities in the morning and the fireworks display, which was incredible this year. I don't know if anyone saw it, but it felt really good this year. So thank you to the West Side Social Club and Carol Hubbard there for their leadership. I did just want to mention I had the opportunity to participate in a site view for the new high school construction project, which those of us here in the studio get to walk by when we come here, but it is pretty amazing to see the work that's happened. They've started to lay out the foundation for different sections of the building, so you can really start to get a sense as to sort of how it'll be positioned on the site. There's obviously been a ton of site work, a ton of grading work, and a ton of work on the culvert that goes through. So work is happening, it's moving quickly, and it is kind of exciting to see progress after all the planning that's happened. I did want to highlight for residents that Hemlock Road is going to be closed in a couple of weeks between July 26th and 29th. That is a weekend, and that's basically so they can bring the culvert that's coming across the property across Hemlock Road. So please plan ahead for that if you're going to Breakheart that weekend. And then finally, just wanted to mention we have great entertainment this summer, obviously movies by the lake and Plaza Jazz, but also wanted to give a shout out to the Wakefield Summer Band, who will be at the Common again this Friday at 7. So check it out.
Any other announcements from councilors? Can't see if Counselor Dombrowski has his hand up or not.
I don't, Mr. Chairman. I'll just echo the congratulations to everyone on the 4th of July.
Thank you very much. Any other announcements?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
Just wanted to let the council know that, we do apply for every grant that we can, and we did apply for a grant through the Executive Office of Public Safety in regards to cybersecurity. And when these come out, I kind of thought this might have been a long shot. But Wakefield did receive $84,066.90. I don't quite know why that was the amount, but that's okay. And this was just released from the state this week, or last week. So great job by Todd and in putting this together, and real important issue, cybersecurity. We talked a lot about it, but this will certainly help us out, and I'm very grateful that we got a really good amount here, and the list is available, and we did a little better than a lot of our communities around us, which made me even happier.
Always good to hear about grants received.
Can I ask, Mr. Mayo, without kind of getting too much into our security posture, what is the grant for? Is it staffing? Is it hardware, software?
I think it is more, in this case, we're going to use more for hardware and software, and maybe some training too, which we do a lot of too.
Great, thank you.
Any other announcements? The only one I'll make is that we have had our first meeting, I believe, Town Administrator, was last Thursday at 6 p.m. for the 40A Subcommittee with myself and Councilor Dombrowski and Councilor Chines. We've already had public participation. I'm sorry?
It was Counselor Vincent, not Counselor Chines.
Oh, Councilor Vincent, that's correct. We've already, although I think you were there. On
like to
Zoom.
keep up on what's
Zoom,
going on.
yes. And we had public participation, and we are working for another meeting very quickly this week, I believe, also 6
Also
p.m.
Thursday, yeah.
It's on Thursday, by Zoom, mostly, although you could come to Town Hall if you wish. Our planner, Samantha Elliott, is working on a survey. We're going to try to do as much outreach and public participation as possible during this subcommittee's existence. We're penciling in a 7/29 date for a first public forum, which may be at a larger site, possibly the police or the municipal
Public safety building.
public
that's what
safety
we're thinking,
building.
yep.
Yes. So we're off and running. I just want anybody that wasn't aware of that to be aware of that, and everyone's welcome. And I hope to have public participation at every meeting, not just at the public meetings or the public forum that we're thinking of for the 29th. And our second thing will be to get to some maps and plans. We're also actively working on obtaining a consultant to assist this round with that type of activity. And we should have that, Town Administrator, soon.
We have a verbal.
We have a verbal. Okay, so we're moving on that too. Just so people know, things are moving along, we're doing the work. Councilor Carn.
I just want to make the point that, and I'm going to say this, but I'm sure you all realize it, that seeking input from the public is very, very difficult today. I mean, you have the younger folks who are getting away from watching local TV and they're streaming. You have the older folks who aren't inclined to be on the internet. I don't know how to reach out to get everybody. So that's the mammoth task that we have, and I think for your committee, if you need the council's support in any way, we should all be there for you, because I was afraid that last town meeting, with the process we went through, that you had people that had no clue that their street was on that listing and that they were being affected by it. And so you get the word out there. I'm not sure how you do it, but it's going to be the most difficult task for, I think.
We're certainly doing it in as many ways as we can. I chased down a West Sider today on my walk, who wrote an email to all of us on the last cycle. I think we talk to people on the streets, we talk to friends, we talk to neighbors, we do it on social media. We will be reaching out with this survey, but I don't think there's ever a guarantee that everyone's going to know what's going on. So here we are having to gear up quickly and having to gear up in the summer when some people are away and people are busy with their camps, their kids, their vacations, and some are remote at our own town council meeting because they're away. So nothing wrong with that. We're doing every possible aspect that we can think of. And if you have any ideas along the way, share them. Happy to hear it. I don't know about mailings and knocking on doors. I mean, that might be a little bit beyond the normal can.
I honestly think that somewhere in this process we have an obligation, and I'm not sure where that is. where you finally get down to some areas that most likely could be affected, that a mailing should go out, that we should let people know, that, look, we're discussing this, we don't want to, we don't sneak up on anybody or catch anybody by surprise. I think it's worth it.
I will tell you, on short notice for the first meeting, because we had to do a kickoff, we had 10 to 12 people already on the Zoom, and we had people commenting, and interacting with us. So I think that number will grow, but we are starting in the summer, and I think that's one uphill aspect of the outreach here. But we have our outreach people, we have Jim McDonald, we have our Samantha working on it. We're going to get this survey out there, and we're going to, let's see how we do too with the public forum, on the 29th. Do we get 5 people? Do we get 45 people? Or do people get more interested as it gets closer to, having something more to look at, right? We have to take this in steps. We have to start with the survey. We have to do the outreach. We have to do the maps. We have to say, here's where we think we're going before people are necessarily going to, before their interest is going to perhaps be piqued, quite like it was last time. It's kind of a rolling ball, if you will.
Steve, is the cybersecurity grant something that would have potentially been cut if we were, is it state-based or?
That particular division it came out of is not specifically mentioned in the
MBTA?
in the list that they put out. However, there is like another phrase in there that says, this will also be considered in any grants. So it's,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the other thing that the committee has to figure out is we have to be very clear at explaining to the townsfolk what the stick is.
Yeah.
Well, along those lines, and not getting too deep in the weeds, it was brought up at our last meeting that Gas and Light could lose $1.5 million. I'm investigating that. It is on their agenda, and they have a meeting, I believe, in 2 days. And I've handed the document that we did receive. I'd never seen it before, that indicates that they might lose grant money or certain grants that they've applied for that are in process. I've given it to town council tonight, and I want his opinion, and I want Gas and Light's opinion as to whether these are housing-related grants. I don't think the grants I was looking at, just my own opinion, necessarily are the ones that the Attorney General has targeted. For Gas and Light anyway, we know the ones that are targeted for us. The Attorney General has also indicated that she may reach out a little more broadly for anything that relates to housing. Now, a DOT or a DOE grant and WMGLD may or may not be a housing grant. So we really need to nail that number down so that we can be transparent with the public. Is it 3.7 million over 5 years, or is it 3.7 million plus 1.5 million over 5 years? I don't have the answer to that yet, and I don't take numbers without research. I'm doing the research. I contacted the commissioner, one of the commissioners. She's got it on the agenda. Let's see what they say. Then we'll make our determination as to whether we tell the public other monies are at risk. I don't care whether it's 5 million or 3 million. I just want to be accurate. Okay, without any further announcements. Moving on to item 12, matters not anticipated. Any matters not anticipated that have come up in the last 48 hours? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
And seconded. We don't have to roll call a motion to adjourn, do we?
I would say not.
All right. All those in favor, Ed, you can just raise your hand to me. Have a good night. Councilor Dombrowski, thanks for attending, and thanks to everybody else, and thanks to the public for listening. I declare this town council meeting closed at 8:57 p.m.
Wow. Broke a record, Mr. Chairman.